There are no safeguarding implications because your camera's on and your mic's on. We are doing this because just with a couple of our partner schools, we may be sharing these resources and a recording by arrangement rather than generally posting them. That's all from me for now.
No problem. Thank you, Richard. Thank you for letting us know that. Very good. And just before we move on, just a reminder, please log on to slido.com, use the hashtag Beyond25 and register your attendance. Not only does that help us know who to send the certificates to, but that is the platform where we interact with you and you can ask questions. So not only are myself, Innocent, and Richard here, but also some student ambassadors, they're answering your questions in the background and they'll have a little chance to answer some of your questions live later on. Hello, very good to have you. So for the final time, Beyond the Classroom, we're all about going beyond what your teachers expect you to do, your homework, your GCSE specification, your things set by the teacher in class. We're all about going beyond that, thinking about taking control, taking ownership over our own learning journeys. So exploring new pieces of information, developing skills in thinking and asking big questions, and criticizing and being mindful of the things we listen to, not just accepting everything on face value, but really thinking about it and applying it to the world around us. These are all really great things that we've been doing in Beyond the Classroom this year. We've done that through Trinity Talks. We've had a wide range of different subject kind of introductions to pieces of research that real academics are doing, and helping us think about really interesting topics from that perspective. But we've also had a few study skill sessions like revision management, how to manage stress, things like that. And we've had a couple of about university sessions today, of which is the second, thinking about applying to university and how to make the best kind of impression you can through your personal statement. And all this has been to help build confidence to explore our own academic interests beyond the classroom. I've already talked about the official certificate, so just remember that will be coming to you automatically by email in coming weeks if you have been here for at least 7 full sessions. And remember, because you sign up and register your attendance each week on Slido, we'll work that out who's been here for at least 7 sessions. The theme of Beyond the Classroom has been academic enrichment. That is any learning experience that replaces, supplements, or extends beyond the restrictive boundaries of course content. So just because a GCSE specification or textbook or A-level textbook stops at a certain place, that doesn't mean you have to. You can find resources online, you can read books, you can read academic articles, you can go onto a massive open online course, a MOOC, and see what universities might be teaching or introducing students to in a particular subject, so you can go kind of beyond what the classroom asks you to do. That can be anytime, any place. We've looked at loads of different styles of supercurricular learning in Beyond the Classroom. We've even looked at Oxplore, that online platform that Oxford University has developed that simply just presents you with big questions that don't have clear yes, no, right, wrong answers. Loads of different opinions can be formed based on the evidence that you read. That's a really good example of supercurricular learning as well. And that can be done just through conversation. It's been really good. But some of the really helpful and really interesting resource banks that we've shown you are the Oxford Digital Resource Hub, which splits into different age categories and subjects, giving you loads of really helpful and interactive online resources or articles to read. We're even saying things like TED or TED Ed talks, short introductions from experts in their field to different subject areas, usually told in almost a bit of a story, helping you walk with the researcher or the academic or the expert as they explain something really interesting or really surprising about how their topic interacts with the world around you. Future Learn is an example of a MOOC, a massive open online course where you can go on, and there are some free resources, some paid resources, and we always say if there are some paid resources that you really want to get a look at, maybe ask your head of sixth form or a tutor in your school whether the school can pay for it for you or get access to it for you. But Future Learn presents you with some really interesting lectures and recorded seminars from real universities and helps you kind of also see what it's like to study at university, whether that's for you, or podcasts, BBC articles, anything like this. These are really good resources to get started with supercurricular learning. Today, we're looking at how doing all that supercurricular enrichment, we've done all that learning for ourselves. We've maybe kind of gone through this journey, diving deep into different topics. How do we kind of present that journey, present that record of what you've done to a university so that they can understand what sort of student you are, that you have taken this ownership over your own learning journey as evidence of how much you love and are motivated and would be excited to study that subject at university. So to help us think about that, I'm going to hand over to Richard, and we're going to start looking at personal statements. Over to you, Richard.
Thanks, Rob. It feels like we've been talking about supercurricular enrichment a lot in this series, and there's a reason for that, because as you can probably tell, we're pretty convinced it's really important for the development of students. But as we've been increasingly focusing on it in latter sessions, for example, linking it with Oxford sessions that we did, we've really been making the case for why it's important in the shorter run if you're thinking of making a university application. Of course, some of you are a younger age than this being a current consideration. Many of you might be thinking about this for a long time in advance, but we know from our registrations and your attendance, we know that many of you are in year 12 who are watching this live. And so we are at the business end of the season in terms of university applications. Many of you in your schools at this time, we speak in early July, are now having the UCAS process opened in schools. And so we're coming to a real sort of practical session on how to put what we think is a good personal statement together. Now, some of you have been introduced to this process, some of you have got it to come, whether in a week or two to come or in years to come. But essentially a UCAS application, it contains lots of sort of factual information, stuff that you can put in boxes, GCSE grades, addresses, AS level grades where applicable, predicted A-level grades that your teachers put in, demographic information, details about you as a person. And UCAS and universities then make certain inferences they read into that information that you put in. For example, UCAS and universities will analyse your postcode to see how typical it is that people progress on higher education from your approximate postcode. They will look very closely, different universities to differing extents at GCSE results. They'll also look at information that provides us with contextual data, like, for example, did your parents or carers go to university themselves? Now, I've just been in a school this afternoon talking about this. These, if you like, box ticking parts of the statement can be quite satisfying to fill in. Nice sense of achievement when you've done those and move through those sections. But most students in our experience, and we are from a teaching background where we supported students who are writing these UCAS applications themselves, find the personal statement, the bit where you're talking about yourself, you're writing about yourself, relatively more challenging. But the good news is that we don't think it needs to be particularly challenging. There are time-consuming ways that some people can spend on sending and writing a UCAS application, but actually it can be done in relatively small amount of time. And it might be more constructive for many of you perhaps to spend more time once you've done that, therefore, on further supercurricular enrichment, or most importantly, perhaps if you have admissions tests to sit as part of an application, on practicing those, and also perhaps later on preparing for interviews. The UCAS application is joined with, as well as your explanation and your personal statement of why you want to be a student on this particular course and your learning journey to bringing you towards this decision and the skills that are going to equip you well for this course. It's also joined by a teacher reference, which is absolutely vital. And in this section, the UCAS application, which teachers and schools write rather than the candidates, the teachers tell us lots of supportive information about why you're a really good student for this course. They tell us about some of your highlights from your learning journey from your school and college, and also, where applicable, also give us particular insights into particular for example, additional needs that some students might have, or particular challenges that some students might have faced along the way. And this is really important to us as well. And teachers know that this is really important. And we do teacher training as well, sessions complement these where we talk to teachers about how we value these and what makes a great teacher reference. And they're always very supportive. Couple of crucial things to outline about this. For many universities, most universities actually, where we don't have admissions tests or we don't have interviews, this really is your interview or your test on paper for the university course that you're applying for. It's all the university is seeing of you. So, of course, you'll want to make it as good as you can. The deadline for these applications is one of two deadlines, depending on the courses you're applying for. The early entry deadline applies to those who are applying for one of three courses nationally: medicine, dentistry, or vet science, vet medicine. Also, in addition, if you're applying for one of those subjects nationally, if you're applying for either the University of Oxford or the University of Cambridge, and it is an either-or decision because you can't apply to both in the same year, then you will be put onto the early entry deadline. And what this means is the schools and colleges send your application to UCAS, the agency which processes the applications, by the 15th of October. Really important to emphasise that this is the date by which the school or college passes the application on, rather than the date by which the candidate hands in their information to the school. Many students are on the later deadline, which in 25-26 will be the 14th of January. But many students that do not need to submit before the 15th of October, that don't come into one of those categories just mentioned, the three subjects or the two universities, do choose to submit in the autumn term. It's lovely to get this out of the way, get the process out of the way. It means that you can then focus in a very busy fourth term of sixth form studies on really working hard on your A-Techs, your A-levels, your B-Techs. I nearly called them A-Techs there. Your A-levels and your B-Techs, and really focusing on the qualifications that are going to qualify you for making these grades for universities. Okay. Now, writing a personal statement is really an exercise in telling us about why you're suitable for the course. But before, we have a couple of recommendations for things that might be useful to do before you actually get to that stage. On a practical note, by the way, the UCAS portal into which you put your information and you put your personal statement when it's ready to go, it's better to work on your personal statement, the second section of the application, on your own device, perhaps on Microsoft Word or a word processor, before uploading a draft of it onto the UCAS website, because the UCAS website tends to reformat it a bit, and you can leave that until the end of the process. You'll also be really well supported in writing your personal statement and filling out your application form by your school or college. Now, everyone I've ever supported and I've ever seen really put a UCAS application in has found that the 4,000 characters you have available to write this information is really quite a limited amount of space. So everybody in my experience suffers from the challenge of going down to 4,000 characters. It's equivalent to one page of A4. I'll show you in a sec with a little bit of a graphic, rather than not having enough to write and having to go up to 4,000 characters. As I say, it's equivalent to one page, pitch 11 in Microsoft Word to be precise. So anything that can help you be more concise before you start drafting it might be really useful. That's why we suggest, in whatever format you choose to do it, perhaps really informally in a phone, you do a little log of the best supercurricular, maybe 7 or 8 highlights of your learning journey in the subject you're applying for, but also your A-level subjects, things you've really responded well to in your supercurricular journey. And as I've put on there on the graphic, it's that latter bit, the third column there. The critical bit is the reflections, the evaluation of your supercurricular learning rather than what it is, because the emphasis in a personal statement really should be on reflecting on your journey rather than listing it and describing it. The two are quite different things. I'll show you some examples of what we think is quite handy reflection in a moment. Okay. Right, so it's one thing to list, which is essentially what the left hand and the middle column there do, but really it's the what's challenged you. What have you learned from this bit? What have you not liked about this bit? That then leads you to showing how it perhaps moved you onto another supercurricular resource. Again, to give you a scaffold, a framework before you even put pen to paper in a personal statement, because it's so concise, a one page, we recommend you think about, at least verbally, and when we say verbally, you don't just read a question or an answer like we've got on the screen right now, why do you enjoy your subject? Why are you applying for your course? You actually verbalize it, even if it's in like your bedroom at home alone, or preferably perhaps with another person at your school. And you can do the same for them, of course, in reverse. Why not break down your thinking? Why are you applying for this course? And when you're asking that question, don't respond perhaps with an answer that you think sounds professional that a university wants to hear. Respond with an answer that really is close to your heart. Is it an answer, for example, that would make sense to a 9-year-old brother or sister if you had one? If it does, then it probably means you're clarifying and really simplifying the issue, which is kind of what we want in a personal statement. You can, of course, go further, break down areas of subject you've enjoyed, as we suggest here in these particular sort of scaffolded sentences. But anything that you can do to get this critical thinking out of the way and clear in your head before starting to, I was going to say put pen to paper, but starting to type a draft of a personal statement, we think is really useful. And there's a reason for that. And it's simply because you need to be really concise. Now, talk about being concise and using words well. A little starter for you. Great to see so many questions come in on Slido, by the way. Keep them coming. Just having a look down. As you can see, I can see those. I'm just going to open a poll. And the question is, what do you think of this quotation as a way to start a personal statement? It's for a medicine applicant. I've opened the poll now. And I've asked you to pick, it's a bit reductive because I have asked you to pick one of these 4 choices. I've forced you into one of these 4 boxes. And I'd really like to know what you think is your best fit for what you think of using this quotation. While you do that, thank you for responding. I'm going to show you what you are telling us. So, interesting. Here we go. So you are telling us it's quite split. Quite popular, as I'm not sure what it tells us about the candidate. Significant minority of you, 25%, quarter of you think it works well because it shows this prospective medic to be public spirited. I like it. 1 in 25 of you saying it's a nice punchy start. These are my words that I'm fitting you into. And then my rather brutal, blunt words. Wasted words, they are not the applicant's own. Just over a third of you are saying that. Rob, would you mind just sharing the slides again? That's pretty much, yeah, you're still just in favour of that. Wasted words, they are not the applicant's own. A bit sneaky of me there. I totally agree with that response. I've been really blunt, wasted words. A personal statement, really, this is just to get across the message that the clue is in the title. It's a personal statement. It's your words. We want to hear from you, not from somebody else. It's a noble spirit, of course, for a prospective medicine student and doctor to be really interested in public service. If so, tell us why that's important to you, rather than tell us the thoughts of somebody else on public service like that. Okay. So yeah, we say no to quotations. I am now getting to the gist, which is looking at a structure for a personal statement. So what I've established, hopefully, is that you're having to be really concise. Now, we would recommend overall a pretty academic structure, and I'll go into some detail there and also give you some examples. You have 3 headings. You have 4,000 characters, which, as I've graphically illustrated there, is a page. About 11 pitch in Microsoft Word. You have 4,000 characters to play with, and you can devote those 4,000 characters absolutely as you choose in any proportion to 3 sections, which together make up 4,000 characters. Section 1, 2, and 3. We recommend that you focus on sections 1 and 2, and you take a relatively limited approach, maybe something like a fifth of the statement in total, to question 3. This is because, just to start with that is a section that's about extracurricular. Now, there are a couple of examples of university courses where we do need to hear about work experience, for example, medicine and veterinary science, in which case there is a particular need, as medics would know, to talk about that, and UCAS suggests that goes in section 3. But we would recommend the extracurricular experiences. To recap from the previous sessions, extracurricular is music or art, drama, sport, volunteering, brilliantly niche hobbies or really popular hobbies that you're part of, the things that make you the person you are partly. Really interesting things that we hope you'll continue at university and indeed way beyond university. But the reason we suggest that you keep this limited is most top tier universities are recruiting on very academic grounds. So interesting as these things are, we really hope you'll carry on doing them at university. It's really the academic, the learning journey, which we call supercurricular, that will help you focus. We hope you'll focus on. So by all means, tell us about some extracurricular experiences, but we would suggest rather than listing them, do say 3 sentences, choosing 3, and in a sentence for each, develop what each has actually done for you if it's not obvious. Some of them speak for themselves. For example, if you've been lucky enough to do a Duke of Edinburgh, then we know that that probably involves heaps of dedication, teamwork, and tenacity and resilience. If you've been doing a big sport, then it is implied rather than needing to be spelt out that that involves teamwork and working well with others and probably some form of selfless dedication. Okay, so limited extracurricular, perhaps that might mean that you might do section 3 in just 3 developed sentences, or if you need to talk about work experience, we suggest that's really the medics and the vet science that probably need to do that. Put that in question 3, which leaves us really with the majority of the statement being academic and being spread over the 2 first sections, sections 1 and 2. Okay, now if there's one sentence that would summarize what we feel about an effective personal statement, it's probably show, don't tell. I know that's a cliche, but like many cliches, it's kind of true. In other words, don't talk about how you're interested in things. Don't tell us about how you're passionate about things. Just demonstrate it with recourse to really well-used examples. A couple of words on structure. Now, if you're applying for a subject that you're currently studying, say you're currently studying maths, physics, and art, and you're applying for maths degree. For us, that's a no-brainer. You're going to lead with your maths. So when you do a first draft, talk about your learning journey in maths with a relatively dominant paragraph, all right? Just talk about your learning journey, have a little look at the bullet points that UCAS provides you with across those first 2 sections, but don't be led by them. Tell us about a learning journey in maths, and that's going to be dominant because maths is a subject you're applying for. And then do so to a smaller extent to any A levels that are particularly relevant to maths. And you might say, if you're doing physics, physics is a bit more relevant. So you're going to give physics a bit of a paragraph as well. Do mention supercurricular in that other subject, even though it's not the course you're applying for. You're just going to be more limited in that. Many students would then say, I'm not going to mention supercurricular or studies in any other subject, for example, art in this example, because it's not so relevant to maths. We would say, do tell us about it, but just be relatively brief. Okay, so in other words, do tell us about those other subjects too. Some of you will be applying for a subject that you're not currently studying. It might be, for example, medicine that you can't study at A level. It might be law that you weren't able to choose. In which case, then what you need to do is you need to lead with that course subject, for example, law or medicine. Tell us about the supercurricular that you've been able to do in that subject. It might be anthropology, study of human civilizations, archaeology, for example, something you can't study before you actually study at university in most cases. You're going to lead with that and show us where you've got your enthusiasm for that new subject from. And then, yes, you are going to discuss your current A-level studies as well, just by definition, in shorter amounts than you would do if you were leading with your A-levels, okay? And again, in order of those that you think is most relevant. So, for example, if you're applying for something like ancient history and archaeology, which you wouldn't be studying at A-level in all likelihood, and you were doing history A-level, you'd probably lead with your history A-level afterwards, after the bit about archaeology and ancient history. And then you talk about any other A-levels with a relatively small amount. So that's a little bit on structure. What I would recommend, what we recommend, is you lead with that learning journey, you start a draft. In about an hour, you can probably write a really good draft on your learning journey in those subjects, plural. As a first draft for a personal statement, you may well not be happy with it. You won't think it's like perfect. I don't think you should necessarily ever aspire to have it as perfect, but you've got something done. It may not address those bullet points that you can see that UCAS use as a prompt, but we don't think UCAS are using those as literally a set of 10 questions, those 3, 3, and 4 bullet points that you can see as a strict prompt, as in you must answer all of these in order. If you outline your learning journey, that will be a really good first draft. And then after doing that first draft, go back to those bullet points and, for example, bringing in particular achievements from your studies at school that you've been able to do as prompted by what relevant or transferable skills, and then add to that draft. We would then suggest, actually, in terms of a strategy for doing this, we appreciate that it can be difficult to get started with a personal statement. But if you can get something down as our first draft, you've done really well. And then perhaps giving yourself some distance from it for a few weeks. Doing another draft maybe in August or September, depending on your time frame of submission, whether you're on that early entry deadline or not. And then do a final draft, a third one, in the few weeks leading up to the time that your school needs you to submit it. In other words, doing it in 3 chunks, really, of perhaps an hour and a half each, rather than doing a tweaking for 5 minutes a day. I think that can take you down a rabbit hole of doing needless revisions of the words you've used. For example, trying to use a thesaurus to find a word that you think is more professional. Actually, we just want really simple, clear communication. If you've answered those questions, but moreover, given us a learning journey and shown us why you're a good fit for this course, I think that's a great start. Some examples for you. We've got 3 extracts and personal statements here. And what we're asking is, what works well with these? Again, on Slido, the poll's open. What works well in this statement extract? Give us a few keywords that you think works well. This is just an extract. I'll leave that for you to have a look at for a few moments. Their beliefs, what they like, it's clear, it's specific. I like that, it's specific, absolutely. Follows the criteria. Read books. A reminder, of course, it needn't be books. It could be journals, it could be great TED Talks and so on, as we've been saying throughout. It's detailed. Yeah, great. I agree with all those comments. It's personal commentary as well. I love that. Yeah. Yeah. Personal. It's personal to them, isn't it? It's not necessarily absolutely unique. Somebody else could have written this, although, of course, the combination of words as written will be unique. But yeah, it's precise. It's specific. Thank you very much for your comments there. Okay. So I don't think, with the exception possibly of the word engendering, I don't think the language here is anything other than pretty simple and pretty clear. You get the sense that this person is interested in studying, as it happened to be, history and politics at Trinity College Oxford. How about this next example, which has much more of a learning journey? And I'll switch on now to the next poll, statement 2. Again, what works well in this statement extract? Their desire to study physics. I couldn't agree more. I mean, whatever one might think of you know, these this particular approach, I think most people would agree that this student is pretty keen on physics, and she can evidence definitely a learning journey. It's my geeky different coloured fonts there, by the way. I just use different colour font just to outline when I think she's going on in a new theme. In other words, in a short amount of space, this is about a third of a statement or a quarter of a statement. She's covered a huge amount of ground. Tells a story of hard work. It is hard work, and I think it's really, really impressive. But by the same token, it's a learning journey, the sort of which we've been outlining through this course. Lots of you are doing these learning journeys and doing them really well from what we've seen when we've talked about your super curricular. Discovery of subject with flow. Yeah, absolutely. Progression. I like that. Yeah. In other words, a journey. I did this, I went on to that. It's very concise. Somebody's been moved to capital letters, super curricular. It is super, isn't it? It's super, super curricular, perhaps we're saying. It's also super concise, even like, the use of the acronym LHC, which by the way, I didn't know either. If just in case you didn't know what that means, it's Large Hadron Collider. The point being, doesn't really matter what it is, but the point being is that it would be understood by the reader who's likely to be a physicist in a university. They would know that LHC, if you were wondering what that meant, would be that. So it's appropriately concise as well. Thank you for your thoughts there. And last but not least, now I'm just going to ask you your 4 thoughts on the third statement. Same again, please. Thoughtfully explains, link what they like to a real life issue. It is, isn't it? It's also an issue that's clearly genuinely interesting to them. It's probably not one that everybody would focus on, Tunisian politics for the UK applicants. Specific analysis, yes. I do think this one actually includes unnecessary 4 sentences in navy blue at the end. I don't think they're necessary. I don't actually think they're really telling you about the candidate's thoughts on what they're discussing there. They're simply telling you the detail, which is not necessary for the reader to know. What the reader wants to know is their thoughts on what's going on here, which is much better detailed in the upper half of this extract. So simple, concise, specific, detailed yet concise until green. Yeah, I really agree with that actually. As I've just said, it's not very personal. No, I get that. In that they're not saying things like "I think this" and "I think that," but they are telling us what they think implicitly without using those words. For example, even very clever little 18 character section, though simplistic in purple there, it's basically saying I've thought about this, and yeah, I'm just letting you know that I've sort of analysed that only using 18 characters. It's engaging with the material. I think this student, to go back to where we were at the beginning, I think this student, and particularly perhaps the writer of Extract 2, she's really perhaps done some form of, that critical table I mentioned earlier, evaluating the supercurricular you've done and really processing that, evaluating it before you actually put pen to paper. I'm just going to show you now what make sure I display it properly. Just going to show you how this might look in the 3-question format. Just bear with me. Here it is. A maths personal statement. What we've done here is we have shown the journey put into the 2 sections. Again, just scrolling down there. You can see that super curricular journey if you're following that. Personal engagement with it. And then in the second section, the candidates telling you about particular achievements in maths. Okay. I'm going to give one more example here. I'm going to give a law, and then I'm going to move on. Here we go. And we see evidence of a supercurricular journey. Engagement by the candidate in the English legal system. Some supercurricular learning that they've done. Engagement with specific books. I'm not seeing a list of this candidate reading these books. I'm seeing engagement with what taken from them. This candidate's applying for law, as I said, so they've chosen to mention work experience in section 1. There's no strict delineation between these sections, strict divisions between what must go in questions 1, question 2, and question 3. The UCAS bullet points are meant as a prompt rather than a strict division. Okay. Particular achievements in history and religious studies, their core A levels in section 2. And then in question 3, they've mentioned a bit of extracurricular, quite limited amount of. Okay. So Rob, if you wouldn't mind just sharing those slides again. Thank you for your poll feedback there. To recap, detailed, specific, concise, doing drafts in concerted 1.5-hour sessions rather than 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there, and we think that'll probably work quite well for you. There are some suggestions. Innocent, would you like to take over from here, please?
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Richard. That was enormously helpful. And so kind of walking through the structure and thinking about what different examples look like and how you might create a good personal statement, and some of the ways that you might be analytical is fantastic and super helpful. We are really mindful that when you sit down with that blank piece of paper, it can be really challenging to think about just starting and developing those kind of academic stories about yourself, but they are a really useful way that you will be able to stand out from the crowd. There will be thousands and thousands of students who will be competing for the spaces that you're applying for. So telling your story in a really authentic way is what we're looking for. I am going to turn our attention to some of the things that we want to avoid. Bear with me just one moment while I take control of the slide. Is that okay, Rob? Yep.
That's it.
Perfect. Yep. So we are going to think about some of the common pitfalls that you guys want to avoid. We've highlighted some of the great things that you should include, some of the considerations around structure, but now we're going to look at the things that we generally tell students to try and avoid doing in their personal statements. For example, Richard showed a really helpful little quote earlier, and we might say that that is quite a cliche quote. So avoiding using generalizations or cliches like that. The example that we have here is, my passion has been history for as long as I can remember. That may be the case, but we believe that there's probably a better way that you can articulate that conveys your interest, your motivations, but avoids using really general statements like that. Okay, so other things that we strongly advise that you avoid doing is listing all the things that you've done or that you are doing. We are mindful that by this point, or by the point of writing your personal statement, you would have done so many different things, and whilst they are useful and beneficial in different ways, it's not helpful to have an extensive shopping list of all the things that you've embarked on. So you may have visited some places, you may have read some books, you might have watched some documentaries and more, and you definitely have attended our sessions as well. But if you share that in that fashion, it doesn't do anything. It doesn't tell us anything about you, your learning journey, or why it is that you're applying to that course. I'm going to kind of talk a bit more about that in a moment, but what we would rather say is try and choose a couple of things and analyze them well, be reflective, and talk about them in that fashion. So you don't need to tell us everything, but tell us a couple of things really well. Also, avoid overemphasizing any any extracurricular activities. Richard mentioned there is a place for them. Question 3 provides you a really great space to talk about things that you've done external to your subject. However, don't allow that to kind of overwhelm the actual personal statement so that you're talking a bit too much about those elements that actually relate not at all to your subject. So do mention them, do think about those transferable skills, but avoid overemphasizing those activities. And finally, in just a moment, I'm going to share an example, but finally, we want to think about the language that you choose to use when you're writing your personal statement. Keeping in mind that it's a personal statement, it's going to be personal to you and it's about your individual journey. So use sensible language and avoid using unnecessary, over-the-top language. Okay, so these are just some of the key things that we kind of recommend that you avoid doing in your personal statement. I am going to share with you a short extract. I wonder, Rob, if you would mind reading part of this, and I don't mind reading the other half. And then as we do, I wonder if we might Rob's like, sorry, Rob, I hadn't prepared you for that.
No,
so
we're
just gonna have a look at this this extract that is taken from a personal statement. And I'm really interested to see what you guys think in a similar fashion to the ones that Richard had shared. We're gonna have a look at this example.
Okay, ready?
Yeah, go for it.
It is strange that a collection of particular letters scattered across a page is humanity's principal method of relating experience. Mere scrolls may elicit joy, anger, thought, and even tears. This is writing's power, the apex of human expression, ideas, and distilled emotion. Words deliver pleasure, counsel, insight. I want to delve intensively into this diverse world of words. The depth of literature compels. Myriad techniques nestle in every nuanced line. I delight in detecting delicate shades of meaning, frissions of beauty in a text. A single change of word order can alter meaning or mood. I am fascinated by how analysis and criticism illuminate a wide canon of literature. I enjoy daisy-chaining books, hopping across centuries, styles, and personas, witnessing the flowering of trends and writers, analysing similarities and divergences. Poetry in particular enraptures me. Studying Keats, I fell in love with his use of nature to comment on ideas of beauty and death. Ode to a Grecian urn may be seen as the appeal of everlasting art or an indictment of the urge to escape mortality. Whoa.
Wow, just wow, is what I'm going to say firstly.
Wow.
What are your thoughts on that extract? So this is taken from a real personal statement, keeping in mind all the really helpful things that Richard already shared with us in terms of what we're looking for and how you want to structure that and the kinds of things that you want to include. I wonder if you might go into the chat and just share, maybe in a word or 2 words, what are your thoughts? Going to have a look at the chat. So feel free to just start populating the chat with your thoughts on that. Languages are, yeah, too flowery. Yep, I'd second that.
I don't know what some of those words mean.
Complicated words. It was hard to listen to. It's hard to read. I've tried reading that. It's very difficult to read, difficult to kind of understand. Expressive. Yeah, it was very expressive. I can definitely say that. Yep. Yapping. Okay. Yep. I did not understand a single word, even though I've read that. I lost myself in parts as well. So yeah, absolutely. So what I'm trying to kind of convey here, and thank you, Rob, for that, because I hadn't even like prepared you for that. I really appreciate that, is the fact that actually that type of language is not really helpful. It is very unlikely that that person actually sounds like that or speaks like that in real life. Okay, and that whilst there are some useful technical parts of their language there, it's a bit over the top. It's too much. It is very flowery and very hard to kind of cut through. So if you imagine being a tutor who's looking at hundreds, possibly thousands of personal statements, and you continue to read ones that read in that way, it's going to be a really painful exercise. What they would much rather appreciate is one that's to the point, concise, using appropriate formal language, but actually does sound like the person. Okay, I couldn't really tell much about that particular writer. Okay, I could tell that they were very good at writing and had a great execution of the English language, but it told me very little about their actual learning journey. And so I say that to say the most appropriate voice to use in your personal statement is your voice. Okay, so make sure that you're being really kind of authentic in the language, that in your own voice, but using appropriate technical language. Okay, so there's no need to kind of use over the top language or to kind of kill your personal statement with a thesaurus, one that doesn't make any sense. And be really clear in telling us and the reader your reasons for wanting to study that respective subject. Okay, so that's what they're really interested in about, is why do you want to study that subject? What things are you doing? What things have you done in the classroom, but also beyond the classroom, that have helped to develop and kind of enhance and deepen your knowledge of that subject? Okay, those are the things that are going to be really beneficial. Again, avoid the shopping list. Okay, nobody wants to read a shopping list, but so don't tell us what you've done, actually show us. Consider the spectrum of things that you've kind of been involved in, and maybe think about the two, possibly three, that have really been the most valuable in that experience, and then think about talking about those in a lot more detail, being very analytical, but also being very reflective as to what they did in terms of moving your thinking and understanding on the subject forward. Okay, so it could be that you've read a journal, you might have listened to a podcast, maybe you've visited somewhere, maybe you've been part of the Beyond the Classroom experience for longer than a few sessions, and there's something that really grabbed your attention that made you think, wow, I love this subject and I want to explore it more. Use that and talk about it in a really reflective fashion. That's what we're going to be really interested in seeing in your personal statement through your own voice. What other things do we want to do? So again, just emphasizing to use your own voice and your own style, and to make sure that you are explaining really carefully things that have interested you, and being quite concise, as Richard said. It's not a lengthy document. You don't have an enormous amount of room to write everything. So thinking about the things that you do include in there, and being clear to demonstrate your critical thinking and curiosity. Okay, so these are really important skills that will shine in your personal statement. And also just thinking about that document and being careful, even though we have shared examples today, it's always helpful to kind of see an example. Be really careful when you're looking online and you find examples of personal statements. They can be useful for kind of eliciting some form of inspiration, but do not be kind of tempted to cherry pick or to try and reword somebody else's personal statement, because that then isn't your personal story. That then isn't your personal statement. Okay, so do use the ones that we've shared for inspiration, but remember not to be tempted to use anybody else's. I'm sounding really teachery there. So I think that we have covered quite a bit of good ground, but also joining us today, we have some ambassadors. These guys have been where you are, okay? They have thought about writing a personal statement. They have created competitive and successful personal statements, and they are now on the other side of this fence, and they are here to kind of help us think about what kinds of things that you might want to do. And we are going to invite them to be a part of this conversation. So ambassadors, in just a moment, I'm going to get you to turn your cameras on and mic on. And to help us kind of think about some of the things that we've explored in this session, but really specifically, maybe we can start with the question of things like what worked well for you when you were writing your personal statement, perhaps what things you use to inspire your thinking, and then any key advice that you might give to our students who are joining us today, who are in the situation where they are currently writing personal statements and perhaps just need a bit of guidance. Okay, so who have I got? Jun, can I come to you first? Maybe you can just introduce yourself, tell us what subject you're studying, and then respond to that first question. What worked well for you?
Yeah, so hi guys, I'm Jin Hao. I'm a first year going into the second year medical student. Um, I would say what worked really well for me in particular, because like Richard's mentioned throughout, we like for medicine, you do require the sort of work experience and volunteering aspects with imbalance with the academic side. For me, what worked really well was to keep reflective logs of those experiences, both supercurricular experiences as well as like my like work experience and extracurriculars, and then I could sort of have it all there and like read through because it's just as like it was the most fresh at that time, and then pull information out and sort of try and make the way I like to write it was to try and make links between each one so it read very succinctly. It kind of made sense like where I was going from one place to the other. For example, I might discuss like X topic I was learning about at A level. It might have this sort of link. Let's say it's like a neuro-based link. It might have this link to one of my work experiences I did with psychiatry, and then I did a super curricular project with HE Plus on like anorexia nervosa and like psychopharmacology. So that was how I like to like tie things together, and I think that worked quite well.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that. I wonder who else do I have. Is it Catherine? Can you introduce yourself and your subject that you're studying, and then perhaps just respond to the same question, please?
Yes, I'm Catherine. I'll finish first year going into second year, and I'm a historian. I think like John Howe said, it really is evaluating the things that you've done, I think helped me. And trying to find links between the different things you've read or the different things you've done. And not just stating it, but going, oh, here's what I think about it. And it challenged my thinking and it changed the way that I viewed this. Definitely helped me. And I think the way I did that when writing the personal statement was color coding it. I know that the examples have been color coded, but it helps you to see. So if you put, oh, here's a book I've read in red, and then if you evaluate it in a different color, and then if you link it to something else, it helps you to visualize the actual analysis of what you've read rather than just having a list of stuff that you've done. I think that helped me most.
Amazing. Thank you, Catherine. And then our final ambassador, I can't see you on the screen. Can I get you just to mic off and introduce yourself and share with us what subject you're studying, and then also respond to that question?
Hi, I'm Kelly. I do classics in English, and I've just finished my second year. I think they've both ambassadors have sort of mentioned basically everything, but I think because I do a joint course, it's slightly unique in the way I approached my personal statement. I sort of had to cram two subjects in at once in very limited characters. So what I did was sort of like take a classics approach to English and vice versa. And I think in general, it works to have a more like unique or like personal like outlook on how you view subjects. So a lot of the teachers evaluating these personal statements will know what you're talking about. So just put your own personal opinion and make it very clear that this is what you think and how it links to other aspects of your subjects, and basically just as what it says on the tin, make it personal. And I think that really worked well for me because I took quite a sort of more underrated approach to both classics and English. So yes, I think that's what worked for me.
Amazing. Thank you, Kelly. And so I think you've done really well there responding to that first question. And in many ways, you've given them some advice as well. But if you could give them one really key piece of advice that you found enormously helpful for you, particularly after going through probably many drafts and getting to the end point, what would that be? If I can come back to you. I'll come to you first, Kelly.
Well, yes, I did like sort of go through many drafts. I think I wrote quite a lot. But I think in general, it's just to sort of make sure there's a through line throughout your statement. So I think there is always a constant urge to throw as much in as you want to throw in because you want to demonstrate the range that you have read or learned, but you sort of have to make sure that each work that you put in there, like each book or article or piece of writing that you've done, connects to each other. So what I did was sort of, here's a book that I've read, and how do I like narrow it down to link to another book that I've read or another piece of work that I've written. So my point here is just to make sure everything is relevant to each other, and that can sort of condense a pathway to how you can sort of link everything in your personal statement.
Brilliant. Thank you, Kelly. So that idea of linking your motivations and interests to things like supercurricular, to then examples of those supercurricular that are then analysed and reflected on. Thank you so much. Catherine, can I come to you next? Advice that you would give to our students?
I think make sure that anything you put in your personal statement, firstly that you've done it and you can talk about it and that you're actually interested in it. I think just being honest with yourself, if you put something down that you think sounds impressive or sounds good, but you don't think you could actually, if you were given an interview, you couldn't talk about it, then that's not actually going to be helpful. It might actually detriment you if you're actually called out and it turns out you haven't read it or haven't done as much as you've said. So a degree of honesty is very important.
Amazing. Thank you for touching on that really important point. Anything that you include in that statement is fair game. So if you are shortlisted and invited to interview, you've included something and they then just choose to kind of pick up, then it's it's expected that you can elaborate. So just being really honest, as Catherine said, is very important. And last but not least, John, what would you say? What advice could you give?
I would say really practical advice for me was in a few months' time, you'll get to the point where like you're just cutting down characters and you have generally the bulk there, but you might still be 1,000 characters out. Try and when you cut things, especially like once you've done a large amount of cutting, make sure you get someone else to read it. Because generally your intention is just to cut out words and like the actual characters and not to cut down content. So then you keep the same amount of content, but you have it in much fewer characters. But what happens is it can read really poorly. If you're not careful about it, and it's nice to get a second person's opinion on it. And I would say like certain things that don't need to be there just needs to be cut, like entire pieces of content. And if that helps the piece flow better and read better, that's more important than having everything in there crammed in.
Amazing. That's so helpful. Thank you for that, because that will potentially be the reality. Once you get to the end, you're going to then start thinking about what do I actually need to weed out here. Our ambassadors will still be on Slido to respond to some of your questions. I'm mindful that we're coming towards the end of the session. And so if your question hasn't been answered or you have some pressing questions that you're currently generating on Slido, ambassadors are still going to be behind the scenes answering those. Rob, I wonder if I can invite you back on to take over and to kind of bring things to a conclusion for us.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much, ambassadors. Please, can we react on Microsoft Teams to say thank you to our ambassadors and their advice, and thanks to Innocent and Richard for walking us through personal statements. Hope that's been a really useful session for us all, particularly if this is something that's on your immediate horizon. So we're thinking about over the summer and coming into September, October. Or whether it's maybe a year or even a couple of years away, if you're just joining us for interest. It's really good to know, even looking ahead a year or two, what will be required of you. So that's brilliant. Look how far we've come. We are nearly done for this year. We've got through so much from physics and social policy to from philosophy, English, law, engineering. Those are some of our subjects, to managing stress, revision techniques, building an argument. What is a big question? Applying to competitive universities, and today personal statements. We've got a long way, but we will be doing this again next year. You might want to join again next year. You might have said, yeah, that was really good. Actually, next year you might be thinking about other things and other ways to develop your own learning journey. But before we do kind of relaunch the kind of program again next year, we want to know more from you about how you found it. So as ever, we've got a feedback poll. We'd love you to have your say. We'd love you to go onto slido.com. If you haven't already log back on, go on to Beyond 25, and there will be a feedback poll up. I'm ready to hear what you have to say. Innocent, do you want to just tell us how that certificate is going to come to us for anyone who's been here for 7 or more sessions?
Absolutely. So you would have hopefully received an email by now. So check your inboxes, and that email will kind of ask for your feedback. But also, as you move through that link that is shared in that email, you will then be able to kind of highlight the sessions that you have attended. For those of you who've attended 7 and more, you will automatically receive your certificate at the end of that kind of feedback / registration email. Okay, so check your inboxes. You should have received something, and if you haven't, of course, contact us. But I'm almost certain that you should have received that, and that would help you to generate your email, your certificate. So don't panic. It's not coming through the post. You'll be able to get it almost automatically once you respond to that email.
Wow, that's even better than what we said at the start. That's really good news. You might be able to get it within your digital hands today, which is very exciting. We have loved having you. We've loved this this Beyond the Classroom season. Well done for joining. Well done for sticking with it. Well done for learning and asking lots of questions. There have been some amazing questions throughout the whole time. We've loved seeing how well you've engaged, and I've learned loads. I've been challenged in loads of different ways. We're really excited with that. If you're applying for university next term, best wishes for all your applications. And I think Oxford just had their open days. If there are other open days coming up, there will be some more in September. Make sure you go to them. Make sure you get to see the universities that you're thinking of applying to. Innocent, Richard, anything else to say? Richard?
Yes. Sorry.
Yes. Some great questions about the availability. Given that I mentioned earlier, this session's being recorded, the availability of this recording. So as we mentioned before, none of the other sessions were recorded, so we can't go back to those. Can go back to this one, and we will put it on our Trinity College Oxford YouTube channel. If you put Trinity College Oxford into YouTube search, you'll get to that channel. It will be up probably 3 or 4 days from now, because it does take some time to process it and get it up there. And then We've had some great questions, haven't we, throughout the course? But some lovely questions tonight about what are the dates of next year's course? Super keen, amazing questions already. And the simple answer to that is we'll announce those in late autumn. Somebody said, I just want to get them in my diary. We want to get it in the diary too, because we want to see you guys again. You've been so wonderful to work with all term. Thank you so much. And last term too. Back to you, Rob.
Thank you very much. And is there anything else to say?
Just to mention that we do have that certificate link in the chat. So if you're not, or if you haven't checked your email, you can just go to the chat and use that from there. It has been an absolute pleasure and a blast having you guys here. Your kind of dedication and engagement has been really inspiring. So we hope that you have a great summer, and good luck to those of you who are actually writing personal statements. You're going to do great, okay? And just keep at it. And until the next time.
Yeah, I don't know what I'm going to do with my Wednesday evenings now. I can just do some of my own super curricular learning. That's great. Make sure you do some over the summer. Make sure you keep track of it. Do that learning journal as well. But also take some time off and take some time just to chill. That's a really good thing to do as well. When the summer comes, have a really good time. Enjoy it and stay very safe. And look forward to seeing you next year. All the best, everyone.
Thank you, guys. Bye.